have a guest speaker, as we always do for Double Barrel, and that is Chris. Would you like to say hi, Chris?
Hey, everyone. Good to be here.
Hi, Chris, Angelo. Angelo, I wanted to ask you, I got a video, You Got a Plunge, about resistance.
Yes.
I've listened to it a couple times, and obviously it's about resistance, pushing stuff away and feeling it, and then basically dissolving it. So I was curious, after listening to it a couple times, my sense of that method of sort of confronting something, feeling it, and dissolving it could be used for a number of things, not only resistance. I wanted to ask you about that because I've had a long sort of history and relationship, of quantity over quality, and it's various permutations. And so I used it in that method. I used that method. I've been using that method about the angst I have around relationship and the challenges and the not perfect and trying to let it go. So, my sense, isn't that method applicable to a number of things, not only resistance?
For sure. Yeah. Well, I could answer that in a couple different ways, but the first thing I'd say is you can apply that kind of method to anything, to any emotion or belief. Okay. But what I find, and what I think most people find, is that when you get down to the deeper levels of, or deeper aspects of identity, the only thing that will dissolve is resistance, because everything else is just fine. So an emotion of sadness, let's say the emotion called sadness, the physiologic response and the conditions that it arises in is totally fine as it is. What makes it a problem is our resistance to it. But the resistance to it is so intertwined with the actual emotion that it takes us a lot of insight, work, and patience to even see that that is the case. That resistance is intertwined with all these experiences, and often the more physically intense experience, that the more physically intense an experience is, the more resistance we find. So ultimately, that video is really just about, when you dig into all these things, what you ultimately find is some level of resistance. And by feeling into all aspects of the experience, including the beliefs, the resistance will naturally subside. Sometimes it does it slowly. Often it does it slowly. And then sometimes it'll just drop, depending on how you're approaching things or how many times you've addressed a certain area of fixation. So with what you said specifically, I think that's great that you applied it to that. Just look into the beliefs. Okay, well, what do I believe about this? Or what might this pattern of relationship be accomplishing for me? What is it providing me? Including, what is it providing me to avoid, for instance? And it sounds like you're already looking into that. So once you look into that, you will often find a feeling or an emotion. And it could be the fear of abandonment or the fear of intimacy. Like in my book, how I describe those are kind of tied together in a certain way. But it's some level of fear of loneliness, fear of being alone. These are the things we find often at the bottom of the cascade of emotions and beliefs when it comes to emotional connection and relationship. And one pattern could be having superficial relationships or having a series of short relationships or whatever. Other patterns can just be you're in a long-term relationship, but you're kind of controlling and maybe you don't even know it. It can be sabotaging relationships. It can be all kinds of things. But at the bottom of it, you often find these very deeply rooted, very developed, very early in life fears that are very normal to being a human. And then we each, based on our personality characteristics and experience, apply our coping mechanisms to avoid those feelings. We apply them in the way that makes sense in our life. And so it can look different, but ultimately that's where you end up going. And what you find with these emotions is it's the resistance to them that's causing these cascades of behaviors and coping mechanisms that can become dysfunctional or just feel not fully authentic to you at some point. At some point, you just look and go, okay, this it made sense to live this way for a while, and now it just feels different to me. I want to look into it more clearly, or whatever it is. And that's when the resistance is softening. So the video I made was really just a very, very direct pointing to the resistance itself. But this kind of inquiry and the way you're approaching it, I think, makes a lot of sense. And of course, you can apply that to anything.
Well, the resistance is probably, I found it hard to really figure out, because in my head, I'm thinking, well, this is illogical. It's not what I want. How can, why am I not getting it, what I want, and all that stuff. So resistance seems to have a quality of being elusive. Would you agree that
when you're in the mind space and you're in the narrative space of thinking about all this stuff, it's extremely elusive. It's like a feather in a windstorm. It's very, you can sense it. You're like, I'm probably resisting something here because I always sabotage my relationships, or maybe I'm resisting something here because I can't keep a job. I always change jobs, or whatever. You may see some pattern and go, there's probably some resistance here, but to directly access it physically, like I was describing in that video, in that space, is very, very difficult. And that's why I really move toward, as far as my pointing toward insight, direct insight, waking up. And then as you get more and more of a subtle attunement to what's going on inside you, then you sometimes can come more directly in contact with it. But first is a sort of becoming mature in the emotions, in the emotion body, knowing what you're feeling, seeing how what you're feeling or what you're afraid to feel is affecting behaviors. Once you get sort of some experience there and you feel much more comfortable down there than up here, then you might start to really see that resistance. Well, it's still subtle, but its effects aren't subtle, but the resistance pattern itself is a little hard to get at, but you'll definitely sense it more directly once you feel comfortable in the emotion body. And again, it's sort of intertwined with emotions, and it's not something you'll ever find directly, actually. But you might notice, I can feel sadness in a certain context and it's fine. And I don't react, I don't run from it, I don't distract myself. But if I start to feel sadness or grief or loss in another context, it doesn't feel fine. It feels like this massive resistance. It feels like a contraction, or it feels like a reaction, or it feels like I go completely into my head and I can't get out. That's when you start to go, okay, this is the signature of resistance. So as you mature through these sort of levels of ability to function, first at the mind level, through inquiry, through looking into beliefs, then at the emotion body level, through direct contact and experience and acceptance and love, compassion for yourself and others. And then you start to get right to the energetics of this. And that's where you find resistance.
For me, that's the nature of the awakening process. The awakening is not separate from it.
I agree.
Not on the side. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
I totally agree. Chris may have something to say as well.
I thought that answer was pretty complete, Angelo. Maybe just a little bit I would add to that, since you are speaking about it, about a relationship. I guess this is a long-term relationship that you're referring to? No,
I'm referring to, I've had a lot quantity of relationships, but not depth.
I see. Okay. You know what, something I would suggest you take a look at. Do you know anything about attachment theory?
Yeah.
Yeah. And does that resonate with you? Do you identify?
I've done some work there. Yeah.
Okay, beautiful.
How growing up, my family of origin, and it's basically a cold family, physically and emotionally. So I think that's where it all started, was distance,
Yeah, often these are just conditioned patterns. And I think that we have to also be careful to just disidentify from it, to just like look at, that's just a pattern, right? It's not really about you. It's just a pattern that's playing out. And I would say, do you have a physical practice? Do you do yoga or Tai Chi or anything like that?
I'm a meditator, and I swim every couple days and work out. So I mean, that's been my practice, mainly meditation.
Yeah, you know what, having come from that background, having done a lot of, pretty hardcore meditation, I I would say what really started to kind of move things for me was to start with yoga, and then, you know, other things from there. But I would say, you know, the physical body, you know, it's a much clearer thing to work with than the mind. And the more that you can sense into the body, that is going to help you enormously in this process.
Okay.
I suspect you're already a master meditator.
I wouldn't call myself a master meditator, but I've been a sort of an off and on meditator for many years.
Okay.
But I hear what you're saying about the body, and I have been doing some somatic work, which is, you know, what somatic work is feeling in the body, the emotions in the body.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. All right. We have Anne.
Hi, Angela.
Hello, Anne.
I wondered if you'd do that on my mid-journey from kitchen to living room. Sorry about that.
Yeah. Oh, you're okay. No worries.
It's lovely to be here. I love your pointings. And so I've got a couple of questions. One is the very, what they're calling the extremely radical, and I think you're very radical, but the extremely radical ones that are, there's no one, there's nothing, there's no one here, which I spent a long time in, and I did have my first shift with that. But one thing that sticks with me, and I'm trying to clear out a lot of things that I picked up and made beliefs of from that. But one thing that sticks with me that he said in particular, I don't want to name names, said that there are no levels, there is only one awakening, and all this delving into stuff isn't necessary. There's no one there. Once you've seen that, you've seen it, and I suppose the reason I asked that is because I did have that initial, what you call an initial awakening. I think I did. I even doubt that now. And there was that honeymoon period, and now it's like this story of my life's been presented full on to seemingly have to go through and clear out all the emotional wreckage of that. That's the first part of the question, if I may ask it in two parts. What would you say about that, Angelo? Because I really trust your pointing.
Sure. Yeah. So, you know, I try not to criticize other teaching styles and teachers and things like that.
And
because I never know what's going to work for who. And that style of teach, I call it Neo-Advaita. And the reason I call it Neo-Advaita, I'm not the first one to coin that term, but it's based on Advaita Vedanta. Often the people who speak that way have come from some lineage in Advaita Vedanta, which is a Hindu lineage. But it's Neo in the sense that even in Advaita Vedanta, there is process, there is techniques, etc. But the Neo-Advaita message it's essentially a direct pointing to no self is what it's attempting to do. And I say attempting because it doesn't always work and it has side effects. It does work sometimes. And I think it's probably pretty good to get people to a first awakening. Honestly, I think it probably is a pretty good approach, especially if someone's been a lifelong spiritual seeker and just hasn't had a taste, but they've been practicing and they believe I'm going to, you know, cultivate some kind of thing that's going to in the next lifetime or the next lifetime. It's kind of an answer to traditional Dharma and the trappings of it, in my opinion. It is direct in a certain way. But I do take issue with it's a little funny where it's like the super radical direct. It sounds like extreme Doritos or like Red Bull to me. It's like, you don't have to keep convincing everybody of how direct it is, because the most direct the people who wake up the fastest, it's not a technique and it's not a method. Some people I don't know if it's karmic, they just wake up very quickly, and it's an act of surrender ultimately. And it just happens. It's really intense and very direct and a steep path, but it's not because they listened to a certain teaching, not from my experience. From my experience, it's sometimes very simple triggers that actually do that. So the rapidity of an awakening and how deep it is, it doesn't have to do with the teaching in my experience at all. And I've seen many people wake up in different ways. It has to do probably karmically, or has to do with them. So so the whole extreme this and extreme that to me is just it's just a way of saying my technique is better. My technique is the most accurate, the most real. I actually got interviewed by the head of the, well, I won't name names. So I was recently talking to somebody who is in a very widespread, well-known meditation system. And they also used that term. This is the direct method. This is the direct path. And it's just a thing now people say to try to say, hey, my style is the quickest, the fastest, the most direct. I don't really buy that, because to me, the most important thing is how the individual, the practitioner, the person I'm talking to, how they wake up. I'm not here to impose any style of teaching onto anyone, because that's not how I see people wake up. People wake up how they need to wake up, and they wake up to their own nature, to true nature. And how deep that goes and how fast that goes is not up to me or anyone, any kind of pointer or what they listen to on YouTube. It's just not. So, so I really try to be more flexible in how I interact with someone. I can speak in a very, very direct way. I can speak right past the self-structure and all that, but it's not always, in my experience, it's not always advisable. It doesn't always work. And sometimes it can be really counterproductive. There are people who I know of, and they've been interviewed. You can look at Rick Archer's interviews and stuff, who became very suicidal with that kind of pointing and just listening to it constantly. Oh, there's only, once you taste it, and then the belief, oh, there's nothing more to do. There's no work. There's no self. And yet you're massively repressing a lot of emotional material. Well, that comes up sometimes turned towards yourself. That energy of self-doubt and self-hatred that you're just ignoring is turning towards yourself, and then you end up committing suicide. And a couple people have. So that's the issue I have with that, where it's just too rigid, in my opinion. It's too rigidly applied, often, not always, but often, especially by the couple of people who are the biggest advocates for it. The other thing that happens with it, and is definitely happening now, is like anything with the ego can co-opt anything. It can turn any message, any set of words, any set of sentences into a message that doesn't actually, there's no actual insight there, or there's very little insight, but you're just repeating what other people have said because it sounds so cool. And the ego is very slippery. It's an altruistic, not altruistic, it's a opportunistic mechanism. So if it finds something that works for it, it makes it feel special, makes it feel a little bit disengaged from life enough so that it can use excuses to like not, work through things or avoid things, it'll totally do that. So any kind of message around this topic we're talking about, this process we're talking about, that becomes very rigid, in my opinion, in my experience, the problems will form. And it's because of the nature of the ego, because the ego is a living thing, and it's very adaptable. It's older than all of us. It's not an actual thing you're going to pull out of your head and go, there's my ego, but it's a mechanism that if you ignore it, well, you're overlooking something that's very powerful, and it's affecting people's behavior all day long. So, and their mental processes. So, so yeah, as you probably see, I try not to have a rigid message. Even systems that I find work really well, like the Fetter system, I still don't put that out there and go, this is the best way to do everything, because it's not. It's the way that works for some people. And that's great. It doesn't work for everyone. And so to me, a maturity of teaching is obvious to me when that person can speak in any different way, but they speak synergistically with the moment and with how the person they're interacting with is moving energetically. And there's very few teachers I see that can do that. There are some for sure, but so that's my overall impression of that. I don't have a problem with it, but there are definitely some downsides, and I think some people have been harmed by it, to be honest. And now it's becoming a bit of a trope. It's because it just gets repeated so much that it starts to lose its actual potency, I think, sometimes. That's my thought on that. Now, the idea that there's only one awakening, that it's like the self just completely collapses and there's nothing else to do, is just wrong. Like I've never seen anybody wake up like that. Anyone. Even Eckhart Tolle, the way he describes it in his book, he just woke up one morning, he asked the question at night, woke up in the morning, and everything was pristine and clear. I doubt it was like that. I mean, it probably happened. He probably had a very, very profound awakening for sure. But I guarantee you there was work to do after that, a lot of emotion stuff and energetic stuff and pain and resistance. I can't talk to him, so I don't know, but I would be really surprised if that wasn't the case, because I've seen people have those kind of awakenings and they still go through this stuff afterward. They may not talk about it publicly, but they do. And there are definitely deepening insights that occur, and they're obvious shifts often, like non-dual. It's a very, very obvious shift. Now, non-dual, the term is an unfortunate term because the Neo-Advaita people often just say this is non-duality. I don't mean what they mean. I mean a very specific shift in the way you experience time and space. Literally, space changes. The experience of form disappears completely. And that often happens, almost always happens significantly after awakening. You often, when people have an awakening, they'll have some taste of that. It will come and go, but it's not stable. So usually months to years later is when that shift occurs. And even then, the shift of what I would call true, thoroughgoing no self often doesn't even occur at all. So that's a very, very rare one. But when it happens, it's very obvious it's very obvious to me that it's happened in that person. So there are definite shifts beyond one initial shift. So if someone says that's not the truth, I don't think they see, I don't know. They just don't have the experience of it, or they haven't worked with enough people and actually listened to people instead of just talking to people. Because if you just talk to people, it's a very safe way to teach too. Hey, this is how it is. This is how it is, right? There's no one, there's no self. It makes it very easy. I don't have to engage with you and go through the yuckiness of your emotions and your self-doubt and your self-hatred. I can just put up this wall of non-dual teaching. But if you really start to look at what's going on inside of people and feel vulnerably what's going on inside of people, you will definitely see that these things continue to unfold and that there are subtler fixations that can stick around for a long time. So in my experience, there are definitely stages to it. And I've never seen anything to the contrary in people I definitely know have had those shifts, watching them wake up. It can happen, especially the first awakening. I think it can happen slowly and gradually over time for people. But even that, I think, is relatively uncommon. It's usually a pretty obvious shift. So that's my answer to part A of your question. Chris, do you have any answer to that? Sorry, I jumped on that one, Chris.
That's okay. That was great.
About that.
Yeah.
That was,
I share your attitude, Angelo. I'll just speak from experience. Like, I have somebody I knew for a long time who I thought was doing great. And I think they had actually gone through first awakening. This is a person who had struggled with, let's say, addiction and depression issues prior, and then went through that wonderful honeymoon period. And I think a lot of difficult emotions came up. And he was floundering for a couple of years when he got into this new Advaita community. And then I found it just impossible to communicate with him after. It was just like very cultish kind of language. There was no having a normal discussion about what was going on for him. And it has occurred to me that he's at risk for suicide.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing what you both said, because you both really described my journey, and it took me a lot to turn away from that message, really, because it was back to the desert and like, oh, what now? It's just starting to feel off. I don't feel finished. Yes, something did happen and it was wonderful, but what I've got nowhere to go now. I've got no understanding of what to do or any practice or anything. And then obviously gradually I found Angelo and others like Shah and Violet, who is really good. So yeah, that just explains it beautifully. And I do see from you both, thank you, and I do see in Angelo that full liberation with the time and space thing and everything like that. The second part of my question is, so I was in, la la land and there's nothing, no one's here, nothing's real, floating around for quite a long time, actually about a year. And now doing work with you and particularly listening to Violet and processing work, now it's like all of my past is just being thrown in my face to deal with. That's how it feels. And if I get triggered, it's like so sudden and I don't know what's going on for a period of time. It's totally too much. And then gradually I can start to sort of see the thoughts outside of me, as Violet has shown how to do that. and work with them. But that period of time where I'm in shock and like, what do I deal with first? Because there's so much material coming at me, is a period of shock that's very scary. And I think, am I going to come out of this alive? Is there anything that you could say about that, Angelo, that would help? I've just had one on Friday and it's just come around now that I've come out of it. But at the time, it's so full on, it feels like I will worry about that. I will never come out of.
I would say that that's case in point of what I said before, all the preamble of everything I said before. This is why it can be really counterproductive to tell people there's just nothing to do. Because what happens is resistance isn't something you're doing moment to moment necessarily. You may be or you may not be, but there's resistance patterns deeply, deeply embedded in our physiology and our emotion body for everyone. So, and just going through awakening is what even makes it even possible to access them in the first place. But when you just keep distancing yourself from that again and again and again and again through essentially this sort of unbound consciousness, this is the no self of consciousness. It's not the full no self. What happens is that voice down there is going to get louder and louder and louder. And when it starts to come up and you have no filters, not only do you have no filters, you have no tools, you have no belief that emotion work is possible or necessary. Like that's not a good place to be. So
That's what happened, yeah.
Exactly. And so this is why I emphasize probably more than anything. Well, I don't know what I emphasize, but I emphasize a lot shadow work, shadow and emotion work. I talk about it endlessly. I talk about shame. I talk about, and this is the reason, just to prepare people, like you're going to come in contact with all this and you have the capacity for it, but you need to learn something that's surprising and counterintuitive for many people, if not most people. And that is that this expansive, transcendent experience of nothingness is also in the physicality. There's actually no division. This is what non-duality really means. No division between that disintegrative and the integrative. And that feels very different than what you want after awakening. What you want after awakening is just to keep going, expanding into nothingness, meditating yourself into oblivion. But that's not how life will show you how to wake up if you're willing to keep waking up. If you're willing to keep waking up, you turn back around. Adyashanti says this very clearly. He's like, there's the up and out and the down and in. And this is the down and in. It's gritty, it's painful, you feel unenlightened, you feel more human in some way. And yet, if you really look, you can still see that identity structure that seems to be there before is not there. You know it's not, but it doesn't mean that there's not something to feel. So this is where I'm getting into like the details of this, but to say, well, who's going to, so I've heard a certain speaker say, well, who's going to do the work? Who's going to do inquiry? There's no one to do it. So who's going to do that? You don't have to know who's going to do it. Once you see what no self really means, then you realize all this is already happening without a self. So don't worry about it. If you ask yourself who's going to do it, you're going to end up in awareness. You're going to get up in formless awareness again. That's the awareness trap that I've talked about so many times. Instead, don't worry about that question. Just feel what there is to feel. Don't deny what's actually here. And when you don't deny what's here, it will keep knocking at your door. It'll keep coming. The emotions will come. The sensations will come. The intensity will come. The contraction will come. And just feel into all of it. That's primary. Is don't avoid it. And then there are all kinds of tools. Like I have the chapters in my book. We talk about it all the time. Different approaches to emotion, inquiry, approaches to beliefs, and it will untangle and disentangle itself in beautiful ways. Then when life gets really interesting and fun is when you start to experience that expansive, ineffable whatever that you woke up to, when you start to see it vibrating as the sound in the room, when you see it vibrating in what's right in front of your face, that is a trip. And that's really cool. It's like where this radical aliveness meets absolute nothingness or something, but we don't need the words for this. It's also where the real, true, deep, thoroughgoing experience of non-agency comes into play. Like things are really just happening, but they're not happening and I'm completely apart from them. You're dissolved into it. Like you disappear into reality. You escape into reality instead of outside of reality. And it's awesome. You're free to feel anything then. There's nothing to avoid. You don't need a radical anything. You don't need anything. It's just full immersion. And that's where I try to point people after their honeymoon period, one way or another. But a lot of people have a lot of maturity around emotion and they just know right away, I need to work with this. I'm feeling tons of sadness and grief. You know, if someone tells me that 3 months after awakening, I'm like, this is a person who this is going to go well for, because they're paying attention to what's happening. If they're like, well, there's no one here, nothing to happen, blah, 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 and they argue with me about that, like I get in my comments sometimes, I'll kind of go back and forth with them a little bit because I'm trying to point to what I'm saying to you. But often I realize like they need to just feel this for a while until it feels not right. You know, like I think Adyashanti has said that too. You know, it can feel really nice to be in that escape of awareness, of formless awareness, just until it doesn't. You know, at some point, something will be knocking at the door. Your body will tell you, or your friends will tell you, or your students will tell you if you become a spiritual teacher and you're playing out all your emotional repression patterns on your people around you, which does happen and still happens in the contemporary, you know, spiritual communities. That's when it's time to look. So start doing the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It just got very dry and there wasn't an aliveness to it anymore. It was it just felt very dead, you know, and boring really. And it's like, where do I go now? But because I think I've avoided the body work and everything like that practically all my life, now it's like such a shock to know where to start with it, you know, and how to juggle it. But I'm not going to keep you too long, Angela, because your answers have been amazing. And I'll just say one thing before, thank you very much. And I just say as well that your recent talk with your companion Violet, when you did talk about how you were seeing the wall or how you were part of everything, was just so inspiring. It's just so obvious that you are fully real deal, you know, not that it's you, but you know what I mean. When you describe that, it's like, whoa, that's it, you know.
How can you know that though?
I don't know. I mean, I don't, do I? But how can I?
How can you?
I know you do. You know this stuff, but
You know
there's
it because of you, but not because of me. You sense the truth of that, but it's not because I'm saying it. It's because you're experiencing it right now. That's critical to understand. I'm happy that what I say and do helps or whatever, but don't put it out to me because it's not happening. You wouldn't recognize that if you weren't already tasting it. It's already there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
kind of. Yeah,
it's subtle, but it's there.
Yeah,
and it'll go from a whisper to a roar.
Yeah, wow. Thank you. You're
Of course.
just amazing.
Nice talking to you. Chris may have something to say, and then I'll let Chris go first next time because I talk so much.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to say about this other than, I mean, there is this natural purging process just happens for pretty much everybody. And if we understand that, it makes it a whole lot easier. It seems to me like what you're saying is you've been going through what I would call a mental storm, you know, or like just an experiential storm with this. And I think for some of us, if we've had a lot of rough experiences in life, it can push us into mild dissociation, and that's not very productive. So what I would suggest to you, if you feel like things are getting overwhelming for you, do something like you can get like a weighted blanket. Just get under a weighted blanket and just, you know, that can help to ground you and just to give you just a little bit more support that you can stay with whatever's going on. So that's about all I have to say.
Thank you. That's really useful. I do disassociate at those times. So that's spot on. Thank you very much.
So I'll read a very short quote. It comes from my book. Well, it doesn't come from my book. I have it in my book as well. So many people may have heard it, but this addresses this very, very clearly. So this thing we're talking about with like formless awareness and disassociation versus deeper realization isn't new. This goes back, you know, this is something many people go through. Everyone goes through it to some degree, but this addresses it so beautifully, so beautifully. If you consider quietude right and activity wrong, then this is seeking the real aspect by destroying the worldly aspect. seeking nirvana, the peace of extinction apart from birth and death. When you like quietude and hate activity, what they mean is what we're talking about, what's avoidance. This is the time to apply effort. Suddenly, when in the midst of activity, you topple that sense of quietude, that power surpasses quietistic meditation, seated meditation by 1,000,000 billion times. That's
Wow.
the difference between being out here and there's nothing, there's no one, to being like fully immersed with no hesitation in life. And there's depth beyond in the sense we want that masculine, that disassociative, that disintegrative, but it's still a distortion. When you experience that as the feminine, as the integrative, integration and disintegration are perfectly imbalanced, that's a whole other ball game as far as clarity of experience and insight. It's beautiful. So, okay.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wonderful.
We'll jump to the bottom. Kyle P.
Hey.
Hey, Kyle.
Well, this is it's interesting thing about my question where you just left that one off with that quote, but it's a bit of a challenge to put together, but I don't think that I'm so my life has like contracted a lot, like circumstantially, pretty much since like the beginning of COVID, and like situationally I like lost all of my job and house and community and everything, like kind of all in one go. And I've never like really recovered or like started it up again since then. And but also it made me see how like I was actually just like hanging on by a thread already, in terms of like my sense of like knowing what the hell I was doing in my life. And now and so it's and I've had like one or two failed attempts at like re-entering life since then. But there's this intuition that it's like I'm not gonna get it back, like in the way that because I realized that how much the idea of life coming together, or like me figuring it out and whatever that means, how much that was fueling me up until that point. And now, so I've been in this space where not only do I not like even if I like I can't believe in that sort of that idea anymore. Like I can't succeed on the terms of that idea, but I also kind of don't really believe it anymore either. And but it's confusing. Well, I've been in kind of a limbo, because I'm also not fully letting it fall apart, because I'm afraid of like just not knowing what will happen, I guess. And also I've had a long history of depression, so I'm skeptical of that sort of force of, or that momentum of like withdrawal or inertia, because in the past sometimes that means like not being able to like, you know, cook or take a shower or get out of bed and things like that. So, but I'm holding those two things simultaneously, where it's like you know, there's something about this inertia or this recognition of like, I never figured it out, and I'm not going to in the way that I ever imagined, or like had this fantasy that I could, or that I even understood what life would, or what life was, or what it will be. And that feels genuine. And also, yeah, I'm like wary of that, this kind of contraction, this stillness, this sense of like, and like, and even looking outward in my life and just like not having that much going on. And then thirdly is that trying to hold this together too, is that point you just brought up of like the watching out for the reluctance towards activity in general, or like preferring withdrawal or detachment over activity or participating in life, and being wary of, you know, trying to figure out whether I'm doing that as well. And so it's just a big muddled cloud of like you know, like intuition and like what feels genuine, and also like not wanting to, it's like wondering if I'm, you know, like fooling myself basically. But overall it's been strange to have this like in a lot of like externally speaking, or like circumstantially speaking, like if I was in these circumstances at any point in my life or in my past, I haven't been in these circumstances before without also being like without them being signifiers of me being very depressed at the same time. And it doesn't feel like that this time, but it's just new territory where I don't recognize what it is. And I'm also like, well, am I really not that different? You know, because you know, I just don't have much of a social life or all these things. And so it's I guess I'm just looking for any perspective on orienting within that, you know, big mess of
Yeah, you got it. So Chris, do you have anything to say to start?
Oh, I think you're muted, Chris.
This time
Okay,
you
thank
really are.
you.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, hi, Kyle. Yeah, I want to just start off by saying, you know, I don't want to minimize at all what you've been through. That's, you know, it's a lot that you've gone through in your life, to lose your home, your job, your community. And the fact that you've had depression in the past, usually those kind of stresses, you know, can trigger depression again. So it is, you know, I think it's interesting that you're not kind of going to that, you know, default, okay, with what's going on. I think what I do hear from you is a lot of doubt, okay? And what I would say about that is make a study of that, like really, really look into your experience by just kind of like looking at what's here that you can actually be sure of, okay? And see if you can tease apart what's really real and what that feeling of doubt is all about, okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because I have a feeling doubt's a problem for you.
Yeah, that's yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah. So my advice would be to just, like focus in on that. Just working directly with the senses is like the best starting point for that kind of work where there's just no doubt about it. I don't know if you've done any of that kind of work of like really looking into your sense experiences.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, that's one way in which studying this kind of material, making that like how it's the most accessible for me, and like not, being up in my head about it.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
necessarily in a
yeah,
structured way.
yeah. I mean, it's never a waste of time to do that. But as long as you're, you've got like thoughts that are going, am I doing it right? Or should I be doing something differently? That I think like it's very good for you to be able to identify that, how much is that happening? Okay. You can take a day, all right, where you just get up in the morning and say, okay, you're having your cup of coffee and you just start off the day and say, okay, you know what, today, I'm just gonna see how much doubt shows up today. And just kind of like look at it where you're trying to, I don't know, just, as doubt arises, you can just kind of like have an imaginary doubt bucket. Oh yeah, that's a doubt thought. Okay. And then you're just kind of continuing with your day and another one comes again. Oh, okay, that definitely has that doubt aspect to it. And see if you can actually feel how that feels for you energetically. It has a certain quality to it.
You're saying the doubt has a certain quality to it? Okay, yeah, I haven't tried that, like singling that out as what it really feels like.
I think Nisargadatta said something about doubt, like really, really investigate doubt. No doubt as doubt. Like it's a kind of an imperative thing for a seeker to get that point.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Chris said, and I think that's actually a really good idea to just spend one day doing this, because like, what's a day, right? And I think the things you'll see are, so when Chris said it has a feel to it, it absolutely has a feel to it. And that's what I feel when I listen to you. When I listen to you talking, like mostly what I was feeling is this doubt. And it may be that you feel it so often that you're identified with it. Like you may think it feels like you, but it's not you.
Absolutely.
And by actually going, oh, it's just one thought here and one thought there, realizing, okay, there are a good number of doubt thoughts, but there's not this constant thing that feels like me called doubt. Actually, you can start to distinguish doubt thoughts from sounds, sensations, the movement of the body, and see, I actually don't have to reference doubt to know what to do in the moment, because what I'm doing in the moment is just what I'm already doing. And that was my initial response before Chris spoke, was to tell you that. And she said it in one form, I'll say it in a different form, is attuning to presence more and more to what is not doubtable. The sound is not doubtable. It's just the sound, right? The movement of the body when you're washing dishes is not doubtable. That's just what's happening. And you can feel, oh, okay, I can't doubt this. This is, oh, okay. And then you just watch, all of a sudden you're watching the hands wash dishes. Like, do I have to think about this? No. Do I have to think about what I'm going to do tomorrow while I'm washing dishes? No, there's just dishes washing themselves. So the more you attune to presence, the more that you'll see and distinguish that a doubt thought is really just one thought in the moment. But if it's intriguing enough because you identify with it, it'll pull you down the thought train, and that will feel like doubt. It'll feel like you're in the doubt, but you're not in doubt. You're not something that can be in doubt. Doubt is an experience, actually. It just happens to be a frequent one for you. And as Chris said, I would make a study of it. You can look into, why do I doubt myself? Did something happen in my childhood? Did I have a parental model? Did I have an experience that said it's safe to stay back here in analysis or doubt? Did something happen? Or, and sometimes just getting to the root of it in your own narrative can actually be really helpful, and being like, oh man, yeah, that one thing happened, and I realized that the doubt and the hesitation got me out of something or whatever. So looking at the beliefs around doubt and make a study of it. I think her advice is very good there, actually, because it's not as real as I think you think it is, if that makes sense. It's not as necessary as you might feel like it is to have that around all the time.
And I'm imagining, based on the response, that the content of what I'm doubting about is not so relevant.
Usually not. Usually, I mean, it's not like there's nothing to ever think about or plan for or consider or evaluate, but usually 1% of what we actually do in our mind is necessary. The other 99% is just rehashing, ruminating. And what you find, again, by ultimately leaning into presence, to the sensations, the sounds, the senses, is that you find through immediate and obvious discovery that, God, I don't have to think about anything really. There's very little I actually have to think about my life and what do I do and where I'm going and what should I be doing. And it's like, there's just walking and sitting, talking, sleeping, waking up. I mean, it's like so simple in some way, but it gets very deep and enjoyable as well, because it's much more alive and immediate and non-dualistic than thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Use a healthy dose of that.
Yeah.
I appreciate both of you guys for your answers. Thank you.
Yeah. Let us know how it goes later on down the road.
Yeah. Can I just add one last thing? Because I think it's like, one thing I would just suggest to you is that, what accompanies doubt often is a feeling of being stuck. Okay. You're just not sure of anything you should do. Okay. And I think it's going to be very interesting if you look at doubt as doubt, and do it, sufficiently. I think you're going to be pretty amazed that this feeling of stuckness is just going to dissolve.
I second that. Just take it to the root. Take anything into depth, into the root of what it is and how it feels and where it comes from, and really, really give it your attention and your heart. And I agree with Chris. It probably isn't as real as it seems, or as necessary in your experience as it seems. Okay, let's go to Lubina.
Hey, Angelo.
Hello.
How are you?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Pretty good, pretty good. I had a couple of sharings and then one question around beliefs. Well, really more specifically asking for help to deconstruct something that's come up. So after we last spoke, I had the opportunity to go and be in Hawaii and be with the elements and do a lot of dancing and drumming. So I got back into my body, which was really helpful, really helpful. And at the same time, I feel like I'm going about my life and I'm getting more glimpses. And as I get more glimpses, there's just outpouring of emotions coming up over and over again, right? Which seems to be a cycle. It's kind of what Eshwar said when I talked to him about it, that it's like a cycle, it'll cycle itself out, although it feels pretty endless sometimes. So there's that. And then the belief that's been coming up for me, and I kind of have listened to some of your videos, and I listened to an interview you did with Frank Yang, listened to a bunch of stuff that he had. And really it's around like, oh, if whatever this path I'm on, if it quote unquote culminates, because in my mind, there's still a culmination that's going to have to happen, right? If it culminates, then I won't be able to be effective in the work I do. And I love the work I do because it's working with people, and it feels like I feel purposeful in it. And I'm like, well, what about that? Like, there's this sense of like, well, if there's nobody, and if I really see there's nobody, then like, how am I going to be effective? And it's like, it just keeps going over and over in my head, and I can't get rid of it, you know, where it's like, it's just kind of stuck. And it's like, no, if this thing culminates, like something is going to come to an end almost, right? That's what it feels like. And yeah, so that's the belief that I wanted to ask about. So that's kind of my first thing. Yeah.
I mean, I would say just in a very simple way, that's like that's sort of the voice of the guardian to the fear barrier. It keeps you, it's safe to be up in this, even though it's uncomfortable to be in that circular loop of thought, it's more comfortable than letting go of that thought, that belief in that fear, and knowing that that some part of you actually wants to go directly into that mystery, because it is a mystery. I can't give you guarantees. I will tell you that my instinct and the relative is you're going to be fine, and you're probably going to do your job better. Generally speaking, but there's no guarantees here. And that thought I just gave you, if you adopt it, doesn't help you get through the fear barrier. The fear barrier is like literally letting go of your mental idea of control, believing that we control life through thinking about it. We don't. It's not like that. But the mind just goes in circles with itself. The other thing is the egoic mind, or let's just say the thought process. It's not like you have something called an ego and I don't or something. I just mean the way the thought process functions when it hears about no self or something, it spins its wheels. It just does not know what to do with it. It'll make up the most bizarre imaginary fears. Like it just cannot imagine. It can't see outside of itself. And the illusory ego can't see what it looks like when its own illusion is dispelled. It just can't do that. So it'll come up with the weirdest stuff. It'll come up with very basic fears that just work if they work for you. And it'll be along a few times. I can't do my job, or I'll abandon my children, or I'll become insane. Those are the three most common things that come up as people are often approaching an awakening. Or even after awakening, they can come up in some form or another. But before awakening, it's very common that one of those three comes up. And it'll feel very real. And part of you'll be like, no, but it matters to me. Of course I want to take care of my kids. It's the most important thing to me. You know, and I've addressed this in various ways with people. One time I said to someone, don't you think the universe can raise your children better than you can with all your problems, or something like that? And I knew the person, and he laughed, and he's like, yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I can also say, I've never seen anyone abandon their children suddenly after waking up. If anything, you just have less barriers between you and anything around you. So you more feel what they feel than you did before, you know. You feel everything so much more directly. So generally speaking, in the relative sense, those fears are unfounded, but telling yourself that's not the way through. The way through is to actually realize that's one thought in your mind right now. And when you let go of that thought, what do you feel? And don't grab back onto it.
Definitely fear comes up
So work on that with yourself. This is a very singular thing. This first part of your question, at least, is a very singular thing. And that's all it is. That thought is keeping you from facing the fear fully, but from feeling it. Just, it's a feeling, it's a sensation. Yeah.
I think also, and I know this is another thought. So as I was about to tell you, I'm like, oh, this is another thought. Yeah, because the intensity of the fear, that I feel like the fear of death and that intensity of it, I've come like close to it, but I keep backing off like every time. So there's some kind of like protective mechanism happening where it's like, oh, if I let this one thought go, I have to go back there again. And what if this time I don't know how to pull back and something happens? You know, it's like this mechanism really at play. Yeah, so that's really that was really my main question. The other one was more a sharing, which came up as you were talking about when you were talking to Anne, and you said that if it's not in your experience, you can't. I can't remember how you phrased it, but you pointed back how it was in her experience. And when I was listening to the interview with you and Frank, like a lot of things just like popped, you know, for me in the moment. And then I went and I watched his enlightenment, like the live enlightenment video. It's so cool.
Mhm.
But also it made me cry, like cry and shake. And I was just like, wow, why am I having a response to this like person just sitting there squinting his eyes? And like, you know, it's like, it's a real piece of art, but it really moved something. So, so when you were talking about like, if it's not in your experience, then it's not something that you can really kind of get. So, yeah, so that came up when you were sharing that. Yeah. So that's pretty much it.
What you got, Chris?
The only thing I want to just say here is I've seen that video of Frank Yang. I love it. One thing that I would want to say about that is I think it can potentially set up an expectation for people that could be a bit of a barrier here. Because the way this unfolds for people can be, you know, quite different from person to person. And sometimes, you know, it's so subtle, the way it can creep up, where it's like we're looking into the subtle. We're not waiting for some big explosive moment, okay? It's more attuning, you know, really into our immediate experience, getting better and better at attuning to what's here in our experience. And, you know, we can start to get like insights and we can start to get tastes of this. But it's almost like a tide coming in for a lot of people, I think, where, you know, the tide starts to come in and you're not really paying attention. And then the next thing you know, the tide's fully in. And it's like, wow, you know? So I just want to say, just be like aware that the way this whole awakening process can happen, try not to wait for like a big explosive experience. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Because in my mind there is a culmination. I don't know what the culmination looks like, but there's just this expectation of some kind of culmination that's going to take place, even though the shifts that have been happening have been pretty subtle and actually really simple in a lot of ways. Like one is getting more just like physical, where my body refuses to do things. Like my mind will make up a story about how I can, but then I won't be able to, you know? So yeah, thank you for that reminder. Appreciate it.
I love that word culmination. I forgot to mention it, but when you first said it, I wanted to say, this is not really a culmination. It's like kind of, if you know what the opposite of a culmination is, it's really that. But I don't know what the opposite of a culmination is. I remember when you first said the word, that struck me to say that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, we got Sam. I haven't talked to you in a while. Nice to hear from you, Sam.
Hello, sir.
Hey, man.
Hi, Chris. Chris, I just want to say you seem like such a lovely person. I'd love to have your kind of vibe in my life as a friend. So authentic, even on a relative level.
Thank you.
So what I wanted to ask is that, well, I guess a few things. I guess the first thing is I'm getting, I feel like I am getting like really frustrated with trying to wake up or being woken up or whatever. I don't really watch your videos anymore, Angelo. No offense, because I just get anxious. I don't watch any videos. You know, I get like anxious, like just seeing them pop up on my feed and stuff. I get anxious. sometimes a lot of the times, like I'll just go in this like intense, like avoidant behavior where I try not to think about meditation, anything related to enlightenment. And I'll either play video games or I'll smoke weed sometimes, or just something that'll get me to, my escape is very much like indulgent pleasures. So like sexual or like food. That's why I smoke weed, is so that I can just eat food. It's like hedonistic stuff. So, because other things don't really work. But yeah, so I'll do that. Or just fantasizing about dying or something like that. Just something to get some relief, because it kind of sucks, because meditation isn't really like or any meditative technique I've used doesn't really bring any relief to me, like any peace or anything. I don't feel more calm most of the time when I'm doing self-inquiry. I have ADHD, so I can't really sit and just even do breath meditation. I feel very uncomfortable most of the time doing it. And I feel fine today, actually. I feel totally okay. But I'm just kind of trying to remember everything that happens between these calls. And then, so yeah. And then another thing that I notice happens a lot is I feel like I switch between methods a lot, like, not necessarily methods of meditation, but methods of inquiry. Like I do the move towards thought, ignore all thoughts, like what is mu, who am I? All these different things, like trying to see who's like trying to control things, this feeling of I trying to control things, trying to move towards that, trying to let go of that, like trying to let go of trying to control this stuff. I mean, I do all that, and I don't do it like on purpose, like willfully, but it's just sort of like I hit a wall. I get really frustrated, and then I just start feeling anxious from doing something, and then like another thought will come up, and then I'll do something else because it feels more less stressful in the moment. And then yeah, I mean, but most of the time, because of my mind, I have a very focused mind in general. I never have. Even on the relative sense, I'm very in my head. So usually I'll just like get distracted by something very quickly, so it won't matter, and I won't remember what I'm doing. I'm usually I feel like I'm in this daze. Most of the times I'm in this daze. I don't really know what I'm doing around anything. I don't know what I'm doing in terms of relative stuff at all, but I don't even know what I'm doing in terms of meditation. There's just that doesn't feel. And then this is what it comes back to too. Is sorry, this is the end of what I'm saying, but. It comes back to this craving I feel like I've had the whole time, my whole life, where I just want this like consistent thing to hold on to. And I know like intellectually that there's no consistent, like even presence, right, with the no self stuff to hold on to. But I feel like that's what I've always wanted, since I was a kid. So I'm always like trying to find that, what do you call it? Like, is it a binky that a baby puts in their mouth to find immediate peace? Yeah. So I'm always looking for my binky, and I don't have a binky. So aside from deep sleep, I guess deep sleep is nice. So aside from that, yeah, man, this sucks. Yeah, that's all.
Which you want to start, Chris?
All right. I think, well, let me ask, do you have a formal diagnosis of ADHD, or is this self-diagnosis?
I got diagnosed when I was 22. I finally went to the doctor. I'm smart enough that I like went through school with like 3.0, so nobody really cares if you have ADHD, if you're okay at school and you're not disruptive. And the ADHD I have is inattentive, so it's not hyperactive. So I just fantasize, daydream a lot. And my whole dad's side of the family is like that.
Yeah. I mean, the way I think of ADHD, I think I see it as like a cluster of symptoms that often like the root of it is a feeling of agitation in the physical body, and you're just seeking relief from it. So then you're just, you go to the fridge, or you go on social media, or you smoke some cannabis, whatever you can do to find relief. And I like my feeling about you, I suspect that you probably need to do some targeted nervous system work just to kind of ground you and help you to get some stability overall. And that's just going to help you have more resources to bring to this. If you want, like I'll put my email in the chat, reach out to me, we'll have a chat.
Yeah, I'd love to do that because I didn't play sports or stuff growing up. I don't really physically exercise, and I know there's a lot there. I know there's a lot of energy there. One
Yeah.
time when I do psychedelics and the mind just completely quiets, I don't do them a lot. I try not to, but when I have done them, the first thing I notice is how much energy in my body is coming out. And even when I sit to meditate, I've told Angela this, like my body's always moving, it's always shaking more than most people, and I think there's resistance to doing physical work because I'm not comfortable with it because I didn't do it as a kid. So I'd love to work with you on that and find something simple and approachable. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure you can do something.
Thank you.
Hey, Sam, man, I always love hearing from you. This is just a personal thing. Like you're just so genuine and really you feel heart-based to me. And I love your honesty and vulnerability. Like it's just awesome. Really. I think you reflect in a very honest and direct way what probably many people in this world actually feel, but hide it. You don't hide stuff, at least in this context, you don't. And so it may look like, oh, you just listed a bunch of problems you have or challenges or whatever, but the truth of it is what you're feeling, what you're reflecting is what humans feel. They feel a little dissociated. They feel up in their heads. They feel like they can't get relief. They feel restless, like all of that. Now, you probably do have a little more pronounced energetic restlessness or you're a more kinesthetic guy. And I think Chris and you will do some good work together there. But overall, I just want to just say, I always appreciate your honesty, and you're such a likable guy. And because you're disarming in that way, I suppose. And I find myself, as you're talking, I find myself wanting you to feel relief and feel a little more like satisfaction and so forth. The other thing that's just my personal response, but the other thing that came up that was really interesting, it's something I've noticed over time now, is the thing with like substances. Like I think it's very simple why people drink alcohol, for instance, or smoke pot. Like alcohol, for instance, obviously some people are set up to have an addictive type of personality, can be very damaging for them, but others who just drink casually and stuff, all it really does, it quiets your mind a little bit, and it actually makes you feel your body. The term buzz, you can literally feel the body more. You just feel more direct sensations in the body, and your mind quiets down. That's what we all want. We just sometimes use marijuana to do it, or porn, or like all these little things that just give us a little dopamine hit, make the body tingle a little bit, and calm our mind down a little bit. That self-directed judgment talk and all the narrative, the yakety yak of the mind. So as you were talking about the things you do, I'm like, that all makes sense. Like it totally makes sense. Who doesn't want a little bit of relief from the restlessness and the restless mind and all that? And yeah, for you, like, the other thing I really wanted to say to you is I think everybody or most people go through a phase of that you described, of like, I don't want to watch the videos. I almost have an aversion to this stuff we're talking about. Maybe some people get it to spiritual practices of any kind, meditation, inquiry. They just suddenly find themselves totally averse to all of it. It just feels really unenjoyable. And like they may go through a period of months to even a year or more where it's like, I don't watch videos. I don't do any of the stuff I used to do. And it can feel like there's something in you that just needs to thaw out. It's like a slow thaw. Something feels contracted. It's an energetic something that we, after doing enough digging and inquiry and watching videos and doing the things we do, suddenly we come in contact with this thing that just needs its own time to thaw out. And so I don't know if that's what's going on with you, but sometimes it's totally okay. You just go through these phases where you're like, I don't want to watch videos. The direct pointing is too much. I just need some distractions here and there because it's just something in you is going too much, too fast, maybe.
Well,
and
I think what came to mind when you started talking about that is, I think, at least for me, it's more the fact that I think it happens with everything, like throughout my life. Like I've had phases of things I cling on to, right? And then eventually they don't work, right? They don't give me relief. They will for a few months, weeks, but then it won't work. And then, or I won't be able to do it, right? Let's say I want to I remember the biggest phase I remember is I was 16, I wanted to get buff, like muscular. And I remember I was like, this will get me attention and this will make me happy and girls will love me and stuff. And so I remember that happening I hurt my back and I couldn't lift anymore and I couldn't eat anymore. I was sick all the time. So I was like, oh God, and then every time I would see workout video pop up after that on my YouTube feed, I would just get anxious, sad, and then it's like childhood feelings. Like it's more like emotional stuff. It's like, oh, you're a failure, you can't do this, like resistance to it, or like there's like, you have to do this, but like there's all this resistance to it because you can't. So it's just like you try to avoid it because you don't want to sift through this rubber band of emotions that has become associated with it. So obviously, like with meditation, like it's like everything else for me, it's like a relative thing. Like it's a thing you do. It can start like that at least. So I think on that sense, your videos have come to represent that of something else that I've failed at or I can't do. But the good news is that ultimately, like suffering just brings me back to it. Like it kind of bypasses the emotional blocks. And if I'm like feeling shitty enough, like I still sit down and meditate. It's just on a relative level, it's like, I think like everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the second part of what I was going to say, like stemming from that stem of like, sometimes we go through this thaw period or this, like, whatever. It is what you're describing. I've seen people go through this, at least the feel of it to me, where it's like, I'm glad you actually just said what you said, because that really feeds into what I'm saying. And it's this feeling of like, what I thought spirituality, inquiry, enlightenment, all that, what I thought that was going to give me, it didn't deliver the goods. And then you get really disillusioned by that. And I've seen, like, I can think of one friend that's sticking out in my mind that went through exactly that about a couple of years ago. And it was very interesting because he's like, why? I don't want to go to retreats anymore. I don't want to do anything because when I go, it just constantly reminds me of that I can't do this.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
I'm like, but how many times have you heard me say, of course you can't do this? Like, that's the whole point. The point is to go beyond yourself, right?
Yeah.
And so just know that even though it feels so wrong in one sense, it feels such a failure of this whole spiritual process. That failure is part of the spiritual process. Like it really, really is. And it's a mark of maturity when I see in people. When sometimes I meet people and they have it all wired, they know where they're going, they're good at spirituality, they understand it all. And I'm like, you're just getting started. Just wait until the wheels really come off, and then we'll see where things go for you. And you come to this place where you can't even choose it anymore. It's like it's gotten into you and it's starting to rearrange things, and it's like rewiring you and stuff. You kind of have that feel a little bit to me. And
can I just share one doubt that comes up,
yeah,
and then have you say whatever you say?
Sure.
So the only doubt I have to that is, of course, this feels personal, like very mean, like, but no, I'm different. So this is what I want to say is that the thought came up of, yeah, but Angelo, I don't like do one thing and then keep failing at it and then have this enormous, like, I can't do it and give up. Like I literally, my mind is smart and it'll go from one thing to another. Okay. And it'll just keep distracting itself. And I'm afraid it'll do that until I die, like everyone else. Like I'm afraid I'll just keep jumping from one thing to another until I die. And it'll never happen because the frustration, the angst will never build up. So that's the only thing I'm worried about.
I totally get it. And that leads me to the third part of what I was going to say.
Okay.
I love how you keep like prompting me for this. This is great. The third part I was going to say is the beauty of what we're talking about is this is different than all of those other things in your life. Okay. It's literally like, you can just turn it up 180 degrees. It's just nothing like all those other things. All those other things will somehow give you feedback that makes you feel like you're in control, even if being in control means quitting when it's too scary or too whatever. This isn't like that. This is literally beyond you. Your mind is smart, but I'll show you something that's far smarter than that. Okay. And it's already in you, and it's already rearranging the wires, and it's already doing its work. I can tell it is. And how does that make you feel?
Well, I hope you're right, because so it's not like one of those things where it's like, oh, like I can't get buff, and then it's like, oh, well, I'll get a girlfriend, oh, I'll get a high-paying job, oh, I'll raise my kids. Like it'll go from this to this. Oh, I don't know what people past retirement do. Like I'll get into gardening. I don't know, but it's not like it'll happen and then I die, or all those things are this like feeding into this is what you're saying. So
what I'm saying is all those things where you go, I think this is going to give me X, and then you find out, shit, I'm wrong. And then you give it up and you move on. And you do that like with different things. When you do it with this, you go, I think this is going to give me X. And then you find out, boom, you're wrong. It doesn't give you that. But the difference here is it just keeps going anyway. It doesn't give a shit what you thought you wanted. It's like your head's in the tiger's mouth. You've heard that? You're already gone beyond the point of no return. So you're kind of screwed as far as the whole mind's idea of how this is going to go for you. But it's going to keep going. It's just not going the way you thought it would. That's what I'm saying. That's what I feel from you. And that's a good thing, but your mind won't like it. Part of your mind won't like it, but it's okay. Energetically, there's something that's still going. It's cascading. It just is.
So it's just happening on itself.
Yes,
And the mind is torturing me for no reason. So
that's
there's no-
right. That's right. Until you stop, you stop believing those thoughts, it'll continue to torture you, but that's fine. Because it doesn't matter. That has nothing to do with this. The way your mind is torturing itself is telling us, oh, I can decide when I do this, when I don't. No, you can't. It's nothing like that. This is beyond anything you think you're doing or not doing. I'm telling you, the process is very powerful. You done fucked around and you got yourself too deep into it. Now it's self-propagating. You can't get out of it. But the mind still wants to tell itself the same old story of like, hey, you know, this is like all those other things, because that's the safe thing to believe. This isn't like those other things. This isn't like any other area of your life.
So then if the mind is useless, then shouldn't I just try to quiet it? Like, shouldn't I just play video games and smoke pot and do whatever will give me relief temporarily? If I thought the mind had a role in waking up.
I'm not sure. It has a role in starting the process.
Okay.
Let's say that. It has the role in utilizing inquiry. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just telling you my instinct about it.
Okay. Okay. All right.
It's already gone beyond you. And the mind doesn't want to hear that. The mind is like, wait, no. I decide how much I put into this or what I get out of it or when I give it effort or when I don't.
My mind wants to hear that because my mind's like, I can't do this. I'm useless. This fucking sucks. I'll never be able to figure out. I just need to die. Like, that's my mind.
Yeah.
Or at least what it seems right now. Maybe
but there's the other, that's true. Yeah. There's the other part of it that goes, but I quit because it was too much. And it was just like these other areas of my life.
Yeah.
That's another part of the mind.
Yes.
All of that is just total blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense? Like as Gary Weber says, it's just the blah, blah, blah of the mind. There's something else that's happening here that's just not any of that. And it doesn't really matter what the mind says or doesn't say about it. That's just my instinct.
Okay.
It could be wrong, but I've seen it. I've seen the pattern before. I know what you're going through. Like I know this is, I know what you're going through, but you might be really surprised in 6 months or a year or 2 years. Like this thing surprises people all the time, again and again and again and again.
So I'm not doing anything wrong.
No.
Okay. All right.
You are not doing anything wrong, my friend. You're doing great, my friend. Just stay with your qualities, which are authenticity, vulnerability, paying attention to what's happening. What more could you do in life?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Appreciate
Of course.
it.
Chris may have something to add. I don't know.
No, I thought that was great. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see if we got more hands up here. We do. Let's go to Lisette.
Hello, do you hear me well?
Yes.
Finally.
Yay.
Yeah, so I mean, what just Sam just talked about resonated a lot with me. Just it's like, I've been feeling like this is like I'm getting stuck, and there's a lot of reactivity and like sensitivity, like so. I wonder how much of a mind identification there is still with that, like when I get so reactive to things, to situations, you know. So, but it has gotten like to the point that even my husband is getting concerned, because he's like, I mean, he's so supportive of this. And he's like, I wonder if that is really helping you, because it's like you're like getting more reactive and all of that. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be temporary. I don't know, but it gets frustrating because it's just like, I don't know. I feel that sometimes I first of all, I haven't felt that I had a big shift that you always talk about, like when there's a shift that you will really notice, it'll be obvious, and like, so to me it's been more like glimpses, I guess. I mean, since I started this path like about 2 years ago after going to the first retreat I attended, and then I don't know, I just wonder if it's like, because sometimes you may like, sometimes I wonder even if like I'm fooling myself, like that I have gone through things that is just in my mind, you know. So kind of like I wonder sometimes like if I'm like even developing like a spiritual ego sort of, you know. So and then I get confused and more frustrated and like, what should I do? And also I wonder, like, about shadow work. I think that's really important. I think sooner or later, that's something that I have to really dig into. And I've been reading about shadow work and listening to videos and like listening and to a lot of videos and different spiritual teachers. But yeah, that's what I resonated so much with Sam, because I feel sometimes that I'm about to drop it all, like stop the videos and just like work on myself and sit down and meditate and do nothing else. So just want to have your advice on that. Yeah.
What do you think, Chris? You got anything?
I had a really hard time hearing what she was saying. Were you able to hear her clearly?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay.
heard her.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say that the theme of this talk today is doubt for sure. Like I feel it so much in many of the questioners. So I almost feel I want to address that a little bit more generally. But Lisette, yeah, don't worry too much about the shift. Like really, it just can be a distraction. Like I said, it typically happens, but it doesn't really matter the time frame of this. I've seen very different time frames of people going through this whole process. And in retrospect, they often are pretty glad it went the way it did. There are people who wake up very, very fast in a very steep path. It can be really, really destabilizing to life. It's not always, but and other people, it takes time, but they adjust, in a more natural way and so forth. With that said, sometimes there are these moments where deepening happens kind of quickly and things get disorienting. And you might sort of be there right now where it's a little disorienting. Like you're going, I don't know, did I have a shift? Did I not? What am I interested in this? Am I really even interested in this? And then you're, like you said, your family's going, wow, you're having a lot of emotion lately and getting triggered and stuff. All of that may sound bad in the relative to someone, but to me, it's like music to my ears. It's just how this kind of goes sometimes, is like, if you know who you are, you know where you're going, you know what you like and don't like, you feel like you got it all figured out in life, that's mind identification. When things start feeling like, man, I don't really know what's going on. What am I even doing? Why am I watching this stuff? Why am I reading this book? It makes me feel sometimes worse. My husband says I'm a little more reactive. I'm questioning myself. I'm doubting. I don't know if I've had a shift or if I even can have a shift. I don't even know what that means. Like, I know that space. And even though it is kind of laden with doubt and it's uncomfortable, it is par for the course. Like, again, everybody goes through these phases. I've definitely gone through it more than once. And when things get too disorienting for someone, like, and they have a busy life and they're taking care of kids and they're working, and I tell people, trust your instincts on if you need to take a break from all of this. It's totally fine. And sometimes taking a break is exactly what you need. Sometimes shifts even happen when people like give up and they're like, I'm done with this. I can't get anywhere with it. It makes no sense. They just throw their books away and they have a shift. Now, that's not across the board. And I wouldn't just say, try that to see if it works. But there is an instinct in us that knows, like, sometimes we go full on, we're watching videos, we're inquiring all the time, meditating a lot. Who knows what we're doing? And then another time the instinct will say, I need a break from this. Like, and it's totally fine. Take a month off. Don't read anything. Don't watch anything. I've told this to people I work very closely with. Sometimes if I'm working closely with someone and they're just almost obsessed with this stuff and watching stuff and reading and analyzing, and sometimes I'll say, what I really think you should do is take a week and don't think about any of this stuff. Put the books down, just take a week. Don't even meditate, just let it all settle. And that can be really hard for some people to hear that. But again, like, a lot of times what we're doing is we're just sort of shaking up the Etch-a-Sketch. We're like trying to erase those habituated patterns. And sometimes those habituated patterns grow around our seeking or around our spiritual identity in our life in the spiritual context, and just stopping for a while and letting all that work you've done sort of settle in, and letting the mud from the bottom of the water that makes the water so murky, just let it settle. So sometimes you have to take a break. And I don't know if that's where you are right now, but it's okay to do that. And I suggest that to people, on occasion. Take a break, live your regular life, just chill. If this is a very strong inclination in you, which if you've been at it like you have for this long, it is, but it will come back later on, and it may be in a little more of a pure form or something. It'll feel like, okay, the timing's a little better right now. So always be willing to take a break. This isn't the kind of thing where you have to like push yourself constantly and work really hard. And sometimes that is our identity, and that's the identity that needs to subside. So we have to actually stop. And so just trust that it's okay if you like let it go and give it up, forget about it. You don't need to like constantly think about this stuff or anything. You don't have to hold it in your mind. It's, again, like I was saying to Sam, it's beyond you. What's happening isn't really in the control in the way you think it is. And any model your mind makes of it is just inaccurate. It's a very fundamental process. So maybe just give yourself a break, and with the emotion stuff.
Yeah, what about the shadow work and all of that? So sometimes I feel like, would it be a good idea to go to a therapist or something like that? But then, I think like if he's a therapist, I'm kind of worried about what kind of therapy. So sometimes if it's not somebody who is on this like topic, like with this point of view, like it can be even worse. I think they can put labels and make a pathology out of this,
Yeah. The therapy thing is tricky because there are very good therapists and there are therapists that I wouldn't recommend you go to. So that's just something you have to work through, and like you can feel into it and see, if you really resonate with someone, if they feel very present, if you start talking to them about this kind of stuff you have interest in, not solely, but you mention it and they feel off put by it, then you may have trouble with that therapist. But if they're totally open to that, then you're probably fine. You may or may not need that. I don't know. If you feel inclined, it's always, it never hurts to just investigate it. With the emotion, it can be surprising how much emotion comes up with this. We can think, oh, I can handle my emotions. I feel emotions. I'm fine. And then when you start to feel them very directly without filters and without as many coping mechanisms, escape coping mechanisms, you're like, oh my God, I don't just feel anger. I like become anger, or I react so quickly. I don't even know what it's about or why I'm reacting, or, so it can be intense. I think for you, finding someone to do emotion work with would be good, like in a relational way. Actually, that's what I'd recommend for you. Consider Michael Zarov. He's got his it's either called Inner Sherpa or the Sherpa Within. I can't remember.
Yeah, I've seen his page.
Yeah, so that kind of work can be really helpful for this, because you get to the root of what causes these emotional reactions and triggers and so forth, and it really calms things down. Doesn't mean you don't have emotions, but they don't become, the resistance pattern around the emotion calms down so much that the emotion is not so overly pronounced. And it also doesn't get so directed outward toward other people necessarily. We feel suddenly much more confidence that we have the capacity to feel the emotion instead of act on it, for instance. So I would recommend some relational work around emotions specifically, like Michael or someone he recommends, or just a really good friend you have, or Chris, you can, she works with people, or Violet, or someone where you can just try to just specifically do emotional work and just in a very conventional way, talk through these emotions, find out what the beliefs are underneath them. What is the fear? Because often when we especially if we react in anger, there's a fear associated. If you find the fear that caused you to get triggered and react outwardly with anger, that can calm it down a lot. And the fear is often something like, I'm going to lose control. That person's going to take control of me, or that person's going to abuse me, or I'm going to I'm going to lose something. Like if we look, we go, oh, I do have a belief around that anger. And then when you are able to dissolve the belief or just see the belief clearly enough that it softens, often we can actually hold the anger on board more clearly, and it will be very intense at first. But once we can hold it on board, meaning keep from acting out on it, then that intensity of anger now has the vessel of capacity of this body mind to calm itself down over time. And it'll calm down to where it's much quieter, much easier to sit with. So those are my suggestions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So let's go. Okay, who's had their hand up a long time? I think Aphrodite has had her hand up a long time.
Hi, Angelo.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. Nice to see you.
It's great to see you. And hi, Chris. I really love the video that you two did together, and especially that part where you were laughing for so long. That was just amazing. It's so good. So of course I'm going to talk about doubt and about control, because obviously that's what everybody else has been talking about, and that was exactly where I was coming from talking about this. So my specific form of doubt kind of came in with the kind of work I'm doing. I essentially encountered kind of non-duality and waking up when I was kind of taking a break from my my work back home, and I was sort of, I was going through a difficult emotional phase, and then I sort of had a little bit of like experiences and stuff, and then when the time came for me to come back to my work and to come back to America and to my work, sort of became like a real question whether that was the right thing to do, because my work is very intellectual. So like I teach, I write, I do these kinds of things. So it sort of like became like a story for me of how can I sort of like navigate that highly intellectual environment from like within this different place. And so that kind of became like a very sort of like doubtful kind of experience, sort of being like kind of operating in this world. And it's, I guess what I'm really trying to say is I'm kind of now in awe of how sort of wise life is, because since I sort of like gave into it and I said, I'm gonna see how it plays out, all sorts of interesting things have been happening. Like a colleague was teaching students about Buddhism, and somehow I found myself talking to them about, not like teaching, but just kind of like sort of trying to give them just a little bit of like just a hint, in a place where I would never have thought that people would be interested and open to these kinds of things. Or I had this other moment when I was invited to give a talk, but like my mind was a little foggy, so it wasn't as clear as normally, but like I could just watch the words come out of my mouth without me necessarily like seeing them as like my thing, in a way that that was also very, very like extremely interesting. And then the other thing that happened was I was practicing the presentation with my friends, and my friend said, you never say I believe or I in your talk. It's always like the paper does this and the paper does that and the paper does the other. And I sort of was like, well, it's because like it's like operating from a different place. Like it's not about like, this isn't about like me. So anyway, so it's just been it's just been like a series of very, very interesting kinds of experiences, in the sense that I feel like, when you live in the world of like intellect and intellectuals and stuff, it's so easy to think there's no space here for any of this. And if anything, I've noticed is that, I guess, like the thoughts about the person or the doubts about the person are being so much of like a hindrance to it, in the sense that, if I start thinking, I'm not going to get this, I'm not going to be able to whatever, pull this off, like it's like a distraction. But then when that is gone, then it becomes so clear that all of this is sort of like coming from a very different place than one would have thought. So yeah, it's just like, yeah, I've been really, really struck by how much like life is coming together, even in like the place where, you think the mind is like ultimately in control of everything.
Do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Yeah. I think what comes to mind for me, Aphrodite, I think that you're attuning to something that's very, very interesting about this process. That, when we get going with this, we imagine we're a spiritual seeker and we've decided to walk the spiritual path and take up a practice and all of that, right? And Angelo, was talking about this earlier, and it turns out that one day we're surprised to realize actually we're being subjected to a process. It wasn't even our idea, the whole thing, right? And I think you're just starting to kind of attune to something where, like, you're noticing things in your environment, your workplaces, and I think this is going to become more and more frequent for you. One thing I would point out, because it was something that came up for me, where it was like I noticed my judging mind, would put an interpretation on a certain person or the way they were, or an environment, and label, okay, well, they're not awakened, or and I just want to say that because it was like a quite important for me to see the judgment in the mind and to notice that like this is all like a spin of the mind, right? And to be just alert to that. It's very, very subtle what it does to us. So anyway, that's about all I have to say. But I think you're doing great.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right.
Yeah, Aphrodite, I agree with Chris. I think you're doing great. What I was struck by was how you seem to have this like trust in life as it's just unfolding moment to moment. And there's different levels of that, but the level that you're describing is really a vulnerable trust, because it's where you realize life is ever changing. Like it's not a thing, it's not a certain way, that's not what you're clinging to. You're actually leaning into it, and that's an energetic vulnerability, and it's beautiful, and you can trust it and just let it keep unfolding, and it just goes deeper and deeper and deeper, and you're endlessly surprised by how little you actually have to be up here at all. Even into intellectual seeming jobs and stuff, it can be like, wow, okay, man, life is quite flexible, remarkable, fluid, creative, and ineffable. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So it's interesting because like I've been in this process where like this thing came up, like this opportunity, but a lot of people have sort of like casting doubt at me in the sense of like, do you really want to have this job? Is this the right thing for you? Like constantly sort of like, do you really? And I'm just kind of like, I'm so in this place of like, this is just blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like letting life flow. And I've sort of like seen magically how things are kind of like working together and kind of making it happen in a way that is just like, it's just
I
like
love it.
it's just kind of been described.
Yeah, it's very freeing when you're not only free of your own doubt, but the doubt of others. And you can see it's just thoughts in their head too. And what comes with this maturity of this vulnerability I'm talking about, this energetic vulnerability, what comes with that is you really start trusting your intuition. Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
Good for you. Yeah, it's inspiring. Yeah, nice to see you.
Thanks so much.
Okay, what do we got here? Paul.
Yes. Hello. Nice
Paul.
to be here. Hi, Angelo. Hi, Chris.
Good to have you.
First of all, really wonderful to listen to everybody. The thing that really hit me over the head was this, like, that spirituality is one more thing that ultimately can't satisfy the mind. Like, I think this is actually very present for me right now, because I've had the interesting experience of walking around feeling internally almost a bit depressed and having, in a way, quite negative thoughts. But then when my attention is more outward in the senses, there it's actually kind of beautiful and peaceful and pleasant. So this is a very, well, interesting experience that I've never had before. And so that really came in, and it's a relief, honestly, because I thought also, like, sort of like, oh, this is disappointing, like half consciously I had that, but now I'm seeing like it's supposed to be a disappointing, or it's supposed to not work for the mind, and then it continues on its own. So I've heard Adyashanti say it, but you forget or whatever. So that's been really great to hear. And just that's, I guess, one of my two questions. Just maybe if the two of you could comment on this, like, kind of feeling a bit depressed, but actually way less suffering than if I would actually be depressed. And feeling that in the senses things are actually quite beautiful.
Yeah, I just have a short thing to say about that. I mean, you're in a very good place, and you don't need direction from me. You're leaning into the senses, or it's just happening in a way that is very authentic, and it's great. And that will take you deeper and deeper and deeper, and everything else will take care of itself. And then what's happening, I think, is the background mental chatter, or the mind noticing conditions of like what's happening or what's not happening, or how the body's moving and so forth, and it's coming to its own conclusion based on its past experience. So it's saying, oh, this is like depression. That's what this is. And it might be this very subtle set of sensations actually, or something in the body that used to be associated with a whole cascade of beliefs and behaviors and storylines. And now it, like, you just see that's not really actually true. And yet the conditions may still be there. So for instance, whatever, I don't know, like maybe I'm just giving an example. Maybe you're in a relationship and then you break up and now you're single for a while and the mind is going, well, this is depression. I should be depressed here because I feel a certain way or whatever. And then something else is going, yeah, but like, wow, look at the tree. It's just so, it's alive. And like, it's like everywhere. It's not, there's no one watching the tree. There's this tree and there's just sky and there's just walking, you know. That's where I want you to go. And you're already very much inclined to go in that direction naturally, it seems like, and that's all I would recommend to you. That's you're actually starting to experience the senses without the filtering of the mind overlaying the senses and trying to turn them into something and trigger a story or a narrative. You're able to actually get that direct experience already, which is awesome, and that will lead you in. It's like it'll actually teach you a sort of different language of reality, a language of experiencing. Not a language in words or concepts. It's a language of aliveness, a language of non-duality, a language of complete radical immersion, a language of trust, a language of indeterminacy, a language of endless letting go. And it's the sounds and the sensation and the gurgle in your stomach. And yeah. So that's what I got to say.
What you said with the example of like, I have it, maybe it doesn't matter, but yeah, like I don't feel so motivated to see friends right now, for instance. And I'm relatively new in the city that I live in, so it's also not a super wide social net. And something in me is indeed going a bit like, and then, yeah, like you said, and then the tree still looks beautiful, this kind of experience. Although I have to say, to not sound more enlightened than I really am, like, it really catches me sometimes also, these kinds of thoughts. Maybe not so much on friends, but like on career stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It will coalesce more and more until you'll just notice like that it not only does it do very simple things, life, the beautiful green leaves and the immersion of the sky and the sensations that are non-dualistic and kind of immersed and synesthetic, all of that happens, but it also does very complex things. Like it can apply for a job and it can learn new tasks. And it just by immersing in the moment-to-moment flow, very complex things will actually come out of that. And it's strange because sometimes you don't notice until after the fact. You know, people will ask me, well, how do you do anesthesia without thinking or just feeling and hearing and stuff? And it's not like I never have thoughts, but there are definitely times like for long periods, there's not thought. And it's like, I don't know how it happens, but I don't know how anything happens for anyone. Even though the mind tells stories, that's not how things actually happen. And that's the marvel of awakening, of realization, is like, holy shit, none of that's been happening the way we thought it was.
Yeah. Yeah. And then another question that I had is very recently, actually, I've been trying like proactively again doing, let's say, non-dual inquiry. And I start with the body sensations and the sound field or whatever. And my question is, how do I know when it's time to move on to, let's say, the visual field? Because let me just describe my experience now. In a meditation, I wouldn't say this is my 24-hour. It's like pretty easy often to see that, or that the sound is not like heard by a thing here, but that it's but it still feels like there's a bit this experience bubble and there's a middle to it, and I definitely identify more with the middle than with the sides, something like that. So yeah, that's a bit my experience now. And again, when do I know it's time to move to the visual field?
Yeah, I would work in I was going to say the visual field is what will change that, is the sense of a center, a sense of a space, sense of space at all.
Okay.
Yeah, you could rotate through those experiences. You can do it just while you're walking around. You don't have to just do it in meditation. You can just walk around and just remind yourself, just hearing. There's only hearing, and then just full immersion. There's only feeling. Yeah. And then when that's fully immersed, there's only seeing. And
yeah,
then
walking around, it's more with seeing. I do it more with seeing. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, and you can, there's no right answer for this. There's different ways to approach it. You can sit and meditate for 30 minutes with the full on visual, or you can rotate through them and you pick up that non-dual quality easily from the sounds and sensations. And then all of a sudden it starts to show itself in the visual as well.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different approaches, but I think you're doing great. Yeah.
All right.
Chris may have something to offer.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Nice hearing from you.
Yeah, I don't know. I sense you've got very good intuition going on already, and you're trusting that intuition. I don't really have anything to add. Yeah, I think you're doing great.
Yeah,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have one more and perfect time for one more. So we have Marcy or Marcy.
Yeah, Marcy.
Hi, Marcy.
Hi. Yeah, for one thing, I just wanted to say hello. I just found you a couple of weeks ago or less, and just have been so grateful. So I just wanted to say that and kind of speak up because I can tend to hide. And,
Well, nice to see you. I'm glad you're here and I love your hair.
well, thank you. Thank you. So I wanted to ask about a sensing that I am aware of, like the simple sense of presence. That there's the presence of something greater than myself in the field of awareness that I tune into. And then since we were talking about doubt today, the doubt can come in and say, well, you know, it's so subtle. Yeah, you're making that up, or, you know, but yet it feels to me, see some of these windows now.
Okay, you're good. I just muted somebody. Yeah.
Anyway, it feels to me a useful place to stay to help move myself out of the mind and into what we are, if this is making sense.
Hey, Chris, you have a response?
All right, so let me see if I can, if I understand what the question is that you are wanting to orient to the simple sense of presence, and then there's some doubt that's coming up that, am I doing this right? Is that the question?
Just a doubt about, it's like just that doubting mind that wants to doubt my own experience. And yet it's real, but it's so subtle that it's easy for the mind to say, you know, and come in and try to doubt myself, and that and that's not useful to listen to that.
Yeah. So yeah, doubt's been an interesting theme here. And I guess what I would say to you is maybe, you know, come at this with baby steps, okay? Things that are like just, there's no room for doubt at all, where you could just kind of go to your kitchen faucet, turn the cold water on, put your hand in, and, you know, feel the sensations in your hand, okay? If you do this properly, okay, I would suggest close your eyes, but if you do it properly, like what you're going to come to see is that, like the mind will say, oh, there's a hand, there's a faucet, there's cold water. But if you actually are like looking into the direct experience, that's not what you're going to find, okay? And like, just kind of, you can probably come up with your own experiments on your own. But yeah, just build on baby steps with this, where there's no room for doubt at all. And you'll gain confidence. But it is the nature of this work that when we start to, attune to ourselves like this, that all of us are up against doubt. That's just to be expected. Otherwise, everybody would be already awakened, right? It would just, so, but if you can understand that, that's just part and parcel of this. And the more you do it, the easier it will get, and you'll gain confidence, and you'll get better at it. It doesn't have to take long.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. Go to the senses, feel your feet on the floor. And then once the attention is in the sensation, then we're just only interested in the sensation itself, without any labels, without any mental image of the foot or the floor or anything. That's undeniable. You can't find a doubt there. You can't find anything there. You can't find any label, anything solid, but you also can't find denial either. You can't doubt that there's an experience there, or an appearance of sensation. So the senses, the five senses, are hugely valuable here. The other thing you can do, and this really works for some people, other people it's just too elusive, or they're just not wired for it. But the other thing you can do is just, as an inquiry question, you can just sit here in your experience without any plan of where you're going to look, and ask yourself, what is here right now that is absolutely and completely undoubtable? And the key to this one is you don't want to think about it. If you're thinking about it, that's not the point. It's an experience. And so what is here right now that's just completely undoubtable? And immediately. Yeah, that's another approach, instead of directing your attention purposely to one sense. But the senses work very, very well for this as well.
So you're saying that the senses work very well to work with this doubting mind, to kind of get it off or stop its continual speaking up. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that this method, what it would do is it helps us to stop believing the doubt thought. Because what makes thoughts recurrent and feel real and solid is we believe them. And if we believe something that's like, oh, I just don't know, is it this, is it that, should I do that, should I do this, and tends to take us out of time and out of presence and puts us up into the thought space. A sensation doesn't do any of that. It can't do that. The only thing I will say about the sense fields, the five sense gates, is sometimes they're pretty elusive to people, surprisingly elusive, until deeper stages of realization. Because the instruction Chris gave, which is exactly right, is the moment you put your hand under the water, you have to disregard the label of what's happening, what the mind is saying about what's happening. That's surprisingly hard for a lot of people, especially early on. Our attention goes out and touches a sense field and immediately comes back and turns it into a story and narrative. And it's hard for me to know who does that and who doesn't until I try to work with them. If I work one-on-one for 10 minutes with somebody about something like this, I usually can pick it up, that they're not in direct experience yet. And direct experience of sensations is so remarkable that often it marks a first awakening, when it's like, oh my God, I've never felt my hand move through my hair when I was washing my hair. I've never felt that. And I've been alive for 30 some years, or 40 or 50 or 60 years. I've had people say things like this to me, and that marks the awakening of like, oh my God, I've been so in my head. I've been looking through labels so frequently and so continuously, and through a veil of thought, that I really didn't realize I wasn't fully experiencing. So that's the only caveat I would give to what Chris said. It works great, but if it just feels too elusive and you keep going into your head, then you can start with the question I said. You can just sit there, put your attention wherever it wants to go, and it may go right into consciousness and thought, and just ask yourself, what is here that's completely undoubtable? And as soon as a thought comes, well, it's not that, because a thought is always doubtable. You can doubt any belief because it's made out of words and concepts, and it always has an opposite. This that I'm pointing to doesn't have an opposite.
No, and that's what I was saying when I started out. Actually, I'm pointing at that myself.
Good. Yeah.
I've been doing this stuff for a long time.
Okay. Then I would work in the senses.
Yeah, I've worked with the senses, and
Okay.
actually when I sense, look, and listen when I'm out, it's like that's how I walk through life.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So yeah, that first point is a little more to consciousness. And if this is clear to you, I would do what Chris says. I would really work in the senses in a very, very deliberate way. These subtle remaining perceptual filters are they're quite subtle. But when you peel it away suddenly and it's like, oh my God, you can't feel that water anymore as a separate entity. That's non-duality. So that can happen and be just irreversible. Like, oh my gosh, like full on all the time, senses, nothing but the vivid senses with no one sensing them anymore. So but they're very subtle perceptual filters, but I think you're at a place where you can definitely investigate them directly. And that's what Chris was pointing to.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you, everybody. Chris, you want to give a quick ditty about how people can get a hold of you? Because a couple of people have asked.
Yeah, sure. You can email me. I'll just say my email address
Chris,
is.
hold on. This is going on the internet.
Oh, okay.
Do you want to give your website?
Oh, okay. So yeah, you can contact me. There's a contact form on my website, Christina Guimand, all one word, at ChristinaGuimand.com. So.
And yeah, you can see the spelling here so people can see it. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you're going to have 10,000 people watch this video. And I still have people emailing me my personal email from 3 years ago from videos. I don't even know where I said my email. So
yeah.
The whole email address here, can you type it? Yeah. Chris, will you type it into the chat?
Yeah, I will.
All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your questions. That was so much fun. I don't know how my hand keeps getting raised. It's so funny. I lowered it and then it went back up. So yeah, thank you, everyone. We'll do this about once a month. We'll have a guest speaker every time. And I sure appreciate all of your wonderful questions and conversation. And Chris, thank you so much for all your contributions. It was awesome. Yeah. Okay. I'll leave the meeting open for anyone who wants to chit chat with each other afterward, but I'm going to zip out of here.